Today I'm going to be talking about Ethereum 2.0. So if everyone's been following the developments on the Ethereum network, you know that this is a really exciting place to be, since we're officially working towards ETH 2.0 in a very tangible way. So before I get started, I'm just going to quickly go over what Ben is, who we are, what we do. So Ben, the Blockchain Education Network, we were established in 2014, and we are the largest network of students, professors, and alumni across the world. So we have over 4,000 students and alumni. Over 15 startups have been founded by people who have gone through our program. We currently have over 60 blockchain clubs in over 200 schools with 11 national chapters. And what Ben offers is free educational material. This is everything from workshops to kind of breakdowns of Ethereum, all the way up to how to launch tokens on the network. And these are made by the Ben team, by club leaders, by professors, and by our industry partners. And this is free for everyone who joins. It's hosted on our wiki. We also offer free tickets to conferences, hackathons, workshops, and boot camps. Obviously, when it's safe to travel again. We offer vouchers for flights, for Airbnbs, and for visas to get students traveling, to get them out to different hackathons and conferences so they can meet industry leaders. They can meet other teams to participate in hackathons, and then hopefully go on to found something from that. We also have WhatsApp and Discord channels where students can share events, they can ask questions, technical, business, theoretical, really anything. And they can also connect with alumni. So this is great if students are looking for jobs and they'd like an actual connection to the industry rather than just kind of sending out resumes and hoping to hear back. We also offer online and offline events on campuses. So we offer resources to help students host hackathons or conferences or anything like that. So, all right, getting right into it. The overview of the lesson, I'm going to present an introduction to ETH2 and the key features. Then we're going to move on to phases 0 through 2. So I'm going to identify what new features the different phases will bring. I'm going to break down terms that you may or may not have heard of, like sharding, cross-linking, attestations. Then I'm going to move on to staking and Ethereum validators. Then I'm going to break down proof of stake. So I'm going to talk about the move from proof of work to proof of stake on ETH2. I'm going to cover rollups, which you may or may not heard of. So there's zero knowledge proof versus optimistic rollups. I'm going to break down what that means. And finally, I'm going to end on Vitaliks' proposed ETH2 roadmap and kind of identify where we are and the possibilities for where we can possibly take this and build out to. So, intro to Ethereum 2.0 and the key features. Ethereum 2.0 officially launched phase 0 with the Genesis block of the Beacon chain on the 1st of this month. So the 1st of December was a big landmark for Ethereum. And this event was triggered by meeting the condition that at least 524,288 ETH were staked on the network. And this was divided among a minimum of 16,384 validators in the Ethereum Foundation's deposit contract 7 days before the planned date. So on November 24th, just a few hours before the deadline, it was cut really close. The threshold of staked ETH required to launch Ethereum Phase 0 was met. So that brings us to where we are today. So Ethereum 2.0, also referred to as Serenity, is Ethereum's major network upgrade. And this aims to improve the speed, the efficiency, the security, the programmability, the scalability, a lot of new upgrades to the network. And this will allow the network to handle more transactions, to alleviate congestion, and to lower the gas fees, which is going to be a great improvement. So instead of 15 transactions per second on a single chain, ETH2 will process thousands to tens of thousands of transactions per second, or possibly more. And it'll do this without compromising decentralization. This upgrade will introduce sharding, proof of stake, a new virtual machine, and a lot more, which I'm going to break down in today's session. So Danny Ryan, who's an Ethereum researcher, he has stipulated 5 distinct design goals for ETH2. And these are decentralization, resilience, security, simplicity, and longevity. So some of the key features of ETH2 or Ethereum 2.0 are sharding. So Ethereum will be split into 64 shard chains operating simultaneously. And this will drastically improve the efficiency by increasing the network bandwidth and also reducing gas costs, which will make it easier and cheaper to send ETH, tokens, and interact with smart contracts on the network. It'll also introduce staking. So this is when Ethereum will move to a proof of stake consensus, which is a much more energy efficient method of maintaining the network. And it will also no longer rely on mining. So here, this is the consensus roadmap that they've laid out for Ethereum 2.0. So the Serenity Roadmap. And so we are currently working through Serenity Phase 0. And so in today's session, I'm really going to cover the first 3 phases. So Phase 0, Phase 1, and Phase 2. Even getting into Phase 2, it's rather speculative since we're still working on Phase 0. So all the phases after that are very speculative. So I'm going to be focusing on the first 3 phases. So let's walk through them. So any developers know that we start at 0. So starting with Phase 0. That's where we currently are. So we're currently on the first layer of the Ethereum 2 architecture, so the beacon chain. And in future months, the current phase will be completed and development will move on to building Phase 1, which is the shard chain, and finally Phase 2, which is the execution engine. So Phase 0, the beacon chain, where we are today. So Phase 0 began with, as I mentioned, the official launch of Beacon Chain, and the objective is to provide attestations, which will be the main source of load on the chain, and randomness for a shard block. So Phase 0 also introduces a new token, ETH2. So Ethereum users can convert to ETH2, obviously at a 1-to-1 ratio, through a registration contract, which effectively burns the ETH that you use to hold. And the community has the option to stake 32 ETH2 on validator nodes, which is a concept I'm going to get into. So just quickly to give you a better kind of visual representation of what I'm talking about so you can really picture it. Here's an image of what a traditional blockchain network looks like, right? This is what we're used to, the Ethereum blockchain, the Bitcoin blockchain. It's a single chain of data blocks. And so here's what an image of what ETH2 will look like, where all the shard chains will use the beacon chain to coordinate with each other. So when I'm talking about shard chains and beacon chains, this is how you can picture it to kind of get a better understanding and follow along with what I'm saying. So to kind of jump back, attestations, these are availability votes for a shard block and simultaneously proof of stake votes for a beacon block. And the beacon chain uses the Casper proof of stake protocol for itself in all the shard chains. And Phase 0 will use Casper, the friendly finality gadget, so FFG, for finality. And finality means that once a particular operation has been done, it's irreversibly recorded and absolutely nothing can reverse it. So getting Ether onto the beacon chain. So all Ether on the beacon chain in Phase 0 is from a one-way transaction to the deposit contract. So users make a deposit into this contract with transaction data that indicates the validator that the deposit's for. And after a validator's public key reaches a balance of 32 ETH, as I mentioned, it's registered as an active validator and it's entered into the queue for activation. And once Phase 0 is complete, there will actually be 2 active Ethereum chains. So there's going to be the ETH1 chain, which is the current proof of work main chain, as well as the ETH2 chain. So this will be the new beacon chain. And during this phase, users can send their ETH from the ETH1 chain to the ETH2 chain and become validators. However, you can't migrate this ETH back to ETH1 for now. So it's a forward migration. And the beacon chain it's really the foundation of the entire system. And it may seem a little bit useless for now, since ETH1 is still running, but it will really lay the foundation for ETH2. And as we move forward, breaking down the different phases, we're really going to see how instrumental it is to ETH2 as a whole. So that brings us to phase one, so that brings us to phase one. So this is moving forward. Now we're talking about the future. So phase one will allow Ethereum to scale exponentially through shards. And the network will be partitioned into 64 separate chains called shard chains that run parallel to one another and interoperate seamlessly. This is the goal. And sharding addresses scalability issues by allowing Ethereum to process multiple transactions simultaneously. So theoretically, it can process 64 blocks at a time. So right now, Ethereum and other proof-of-work chains, they can only process one consecutive block at a time. So if there's a backup of transactions, those transactions have to wait until one block is processed before they can be confirmed. In the next one, this causes a backlog on the network. So in phase one, multiple chains can operate alongside each other so that the data burden can be spread across blocks that are all processed simultaneously to alleviate this burden on the network that we see currently and that we saw over the summer with the high gas fees. So shard chains are what will drive future scalability since they allow parallel transaction throughput. And throughput is something that I'll get to in a little bit. Phase one, it's mostly concerned with the construction, the validity, and the consensus on the data of these shard chains. It'll act as a trial run for the sharding structure and not as an attempt to use shards to scale. And the beacon chain will treat shard chain blocks as simple collections of bits with no structure or meaning. So they'll be pretty arbitrary in this phase. The ETH1 and the ETH2 chains will still operate in parallel after phase one. And phase one will allow these shards to communicate with each other through crosslinking. So if we go back here, in purple here with the circle, this is the idea of crosslinking. So what are crosslinks? A sufficient number of attestations for the same shard block will create a crosslink, which confirms the shard segment up to that shard block into the beacon chain. And so if you remember, I said before, attestations are availability votes for a shard block and proof of stake votes for a beacon block. So from time to time, the current state of each shard gets recorded in a beacon chain block as a crosslink. And when the beacon chain block has been finalized, the corresponding shard block is considered finalized as well. And other shards know that they can rely on it for cross-shard transactions. Crosslinks are essentially a set of signatures from a committee attesting to a block in a shard chain, which can be included into the beacon chain. And crosslinks are how the beacon chain learns about the updated state of shard chains. And crosslinks are also the infrastructure for asynchronous cross-shard communication. So the beacon chain will randomly select shard validators for each shard at each slot who come to an agreement on each block's content. They attest to the shard's contents and state through crosslinking. As of right now, there's no firm launch date for phase one, but it's anticipated sometime in 2021, we hope. So now we have kind of what's referred to in the community as phase 1.5. And it's the merging of the original proof of work Ethereum blockchain with the new proof of stake chain within phase one. And what this means is that the proof of work blockchain will be migrated into Ethereum 2.0 and exist as one of these 64 shard chains alongside the beacon chain so that there's no break in continuity or data history. And this also means that ETH holders won't have to do a token swap or a transfer, a token transfer or swap between Ethereum 1 and Ethereum 2. They'll be able to use their ETH on Ethereum 2.0 seamlessly, in theory. So the history of the original proof of work chain will still exist, but it won't need the proof of work consensus mechanism to be maintained. Instead, it'll operate just like any of the other proof of stake shard so on Ethereum 2.0. And then you have kind of what's referred to as Ethereum 1x. So Ethereum 2.0 is not expected to be fully functional until phase 2. And during that time, obviously, the blockchain ecosystem will continue to grow. So the developers, the dApp builders, the enterprises, the organizations, these all still need support. So the Ethereum proof of work chain will continue to exist until at least phase 1. And this is what's kind of being colloquially referred to as Ethereum 1x. So developers will still be committed to improving Ethereum 1x even as Ethereum 2 is being built. So that brings us to phase 2. This is the state execution. And phase 2 will be the final form. Again, this doesn't mean that development will cease, but this is kind of the final form of Ethereum 2.0. And this is when the existing, at that point, legacy proof of work and the new proof of stake network will come together to mark the official merge into ETH2. And phase 2 is where the functionality of the entire system will really start to come together. Shard chains will transition from simple data containers, as I mentioned they would be in phase 1, to a structured chain state and smart contracts. This is when smart contracts are going to be reintroduced. Each shard will manage a virtual machine based on EWASM, which is the Ethereum Web Assembly, and it'll support accounts, contracts, state, and other abstractions that currently are supported with Solidity. And so tools like Truffle and Ganache will be ported to support EWASM either before or during phase 2. So this is a quick breakdown of the Ethereum WebAssembly. So it's, as you can see here, it's a proposed redesign of the Ethereum smart contract execution layer. And it also introduces the possibility to develop smart contracts in many traditional programming languages like C, C++, and Rust. So phase 2, it also introduces the concept of what's called execution environments. And these will allow developers to create their own transaction processing methods so that they can use the rules of different blockchains within Ethereum, which is pretty cool. So every shard has access to all execution environments and has the ability to make transactions within them, as well as run and interact with smart contracts. And again, this is all in very early stages of research and development. But in phase 2, so a dApp will have to choose what shard it wants to be on. And cross-shard communication on ETH2 isn't synchronous. And this does mean that some composability will be lost between shards. So that's kind of the fastest breakdown of the 3 projected phases for ETH2. So as I mentioned, we're currently in phase 0 with the beacon chain. So I've mentioned staking and I've mentioned Ethereum validators. So I'm going to kind of get into that and explain what that means. So the deposit contract address release, the required specifications of ETH2 version 1 and the mainnet deposit contract address for staking were released on November 4th, meaning that ETH2 users could officially stake their ETH and become validators to help secure the network. So I will note, the process is open now, but I will note that you can't just send ETH to the contract. Otherwise, the transaction, it's going to fail. You need to go through the Ethereum Launchpad, which is literally launchpad.ethereum.org. You need to go through the Ethereum Launchpad and follow the guide to begin staking. And also staking and running a validator, it requires a lot of effort, a lot of time. It's about 2 days to set up, and technical expertise. And failing to meet any of the requirements can end up with either a partial or a full loss of the ETH that you're trying to stake. So definitely read through the guides, reach out to a developer community if you're having troubles. Don't just kind of go at it willy-nilly. So staking Ethereum on a validator node. as I mentioned, ETH2, it's moving to a proof of stake consensus. So the staked 32 ETH2 from phase 0, that will be used and is being used to validate the transactions in state on the network, as well as acting as a guarantee that the validator node will be honest and operational and will remain operational. And in return, those who stake will be rewarded for their efforts. So current calculations of ETH2 staking show about a return annually of about 14.2%. And what this also means is that Ethereum mining will eventually be phased out. So here you can see the kind of increase in the staking rewards, the proposed or the speculative increase in staking rewards. And here, here's a beacon node status of an Ethereum validator node that experienced some initial downtime. And what this resulted in was a loss of 0.01333 Ether as a penalty for missing the votes. And so what this shows is that votes are mandatory once a node is activated. In an offline node, that means that the votes are missed or can be missed, and this results in a penalty of loss of ETH that you've staked. So I mentioned proof of stake a few times now, and this is really one of the most significant changes introduced in ETH2 is the migration to the proof of stake consensus mechanism from the current architecture, which is maintained by a proof of work consensus mechanism. In ETH2, So in ETH2, one of the goals for the proof of stake is to lower the barrier to entry so that more individual validators can participate. And they can also earn a shared return on maintaining the network and combating. This also, what this does is this combats the onset of very centralized mining and very high energy costs that we see right now. So proof of stake, it replaces the two primary components of proof of work. And these are miners and electricity. And it replaces these in ETH2 with validators and stake. So validators replace miners as the individuals who maintain the agreed upon state of the network, and they receive rewards for randomly selecting the next block of data. In proof of work, miners expend energy in the form of hash power, and they do this by consuming electricity to confirm blocks, whereas validators on a proof of stake system, they commit 32 ETH instead of expending all this energy. So it's far more energy efficient. So validators will stake at least this 32 ETH by depositing the funds into the official deposit contract. Validators will download and run ETH2 client software. And while running this client software, they'll be randomly selected to propose and attest to blocks on the ETH2 blockchain. And validators who correctly propose and attest to blocks will receive a reward of ETH as a percentage of their stake. So as I mentioned, and as you saw before, if a validator fails to stay online and execute their share of computational responsibilities, their block reward will be moderately decrease in order to incentivize validators, as I mentioned, to stay online as consistently as possible. And if a validator attempts to compromise the network by validating, say, incorrect data history, either some or all of their 32 staked ETH will be slashed. And this is really what drives the incentivization on the network. So addressing the issue of accessibility from before, there's two solutions to the barriers to entry currently anticipated on ETH2. And these are one, that companies are starting to offer staking services to manage client operations for users who stake the 32 ETH. And this is to overcome the technical knowledge of running their own client. And obviously, they incur a small fee for this. And also, if an ETH holder only wants to or is only able to stake less than 32 ETH, they can join a staking pool where their funds are pooled with others in order to reach 32 ETH. And obviously, the rewards are proportional to their stake. And so to kind of come back to what I covered before, with the beacon chain now live, and when proof of stake is implemented, the original proof of work blockchain will continue to exist. In phase 0, the beacon chain isn't really all that useful, as I mentioned, to the majority of Ethereum users, since it can't process transactions, can't execute smart contracts, or host dApps, but this is intentional. This is to ensure that the proof of stake undergoes considerable testing as a live network before dApps are introduced and before users transact on it. And so that the launch of ETH2 doesn't disrupt the existing Ethereum ecosystem, the original Ethereum blockchain will continue to run in parallel, as well as receive upgrades during phase 0. And then in phase 1.5, the two blockchains will merge onto one single Ethereum network. So looking forward, I would argue that one of the main technical hurdles for ETH2, and this is maybe something that you've heard about, if not, I'm going to break it down. One of the main technical hurdles that ETH2 has to tackle is adopting rollups. And rollups are throughput solutions for dApps. So I've mentioned throughput before, but just to clarify, rollups are not a scaling solution for Ethereum, but a throughput solution. And what this means is that scalability increases the number of transactions a network can process without changing hardware requirements, whereas throughput, on the other hand, it increases the number of transactions as well, but it requires more hardware to get it done. So here's kind of the amalgamated visual for how ETH1, ETH2, and rollups all fit together. But essentially, a rollup is an off-chain aggregation of transactions inside an Ethereum smart contract. And Ethereum users can transact inside the smart contract with security guarantees that their transactions, A, won't be misused, and B, will settle to the main chain at some future point. And we began to see the advantages of transaction aggregation for dApps this summer with the insanely high transaction fees on the network. And you can think of rollups kind of like a mining block where transactions are moved off-chain, bundled, sequenced, and then sent back to the main chain. And currently, there's two methods of guaranteeing transactions. One is zero-knowledge proof rollups that rely on math, and the other is optimistic rollups that rely on financial incentives. And the connection between the two is the mechanism that proves the validity of transactions. And this means that the bundle of transactions included in a rollup, it needs to be verified in some way. So zero-knowledge proof rollups, what they do is they bundle a group of transactions, compress them, and then issue a zero-knowledge proof to certify that the state transitions, the state transition's validity. And so when the transaction is sent to the main chain, the block is verified by the attached zero-knowledge proof. Optimistic rollups, these use game theory, and they're referred to as optimistic because aggregators publish only the bare minimum information needed with no proofs, assuming that the aggregators run without committing frauds, and they only provide proofs in case of fraud. So for anyone who wants to kind of explore ETH2 a little bit more, you can launch the ETH2 Explorer and kind of play around with it. It's at beaconcha.in. So this brings us to kind of the final portion of this, and this is Vitaliks' proposed ETH2 roadmap. I apologize that this is really small. It's a huge image, so I would recommend finding him on Twitter and going through this a little bit closer up. But so Vitalik tweeted this out, and he said, quote, "This is my approximate view of what the next 5 to 10 years of ETH2 and beyond might look like. Roadmap below reflects my own views. Others may have different perspectives. Details may, of course, change as we discover new info or new tech." So this is kind of the proposed roadmap as of now, according to Vitalik. And so, as you can see, there's 4 main parts to this roadmap. So from top to bottom, it's ETH1 other. So ETH1X other, ETH1X statelessness, and then there's kind of this nucleus that starts from ETH2 phase 0 and converges to the ETH1, then the ETH2 merge that removes the proof of work. And then you have ETH2, phase 2 and beyond. So this is kind of where are we at right here. You can see here that this is where ultra scalable rollups become possible, and then ultra scalable rollups become better. So this is kind of where we are sitting right now in the proposed the speculative roadmap. So this kind of gives you a better perspective of all the different moving parts of the network, where we've come from, all the possibilities that we can move through in the future. And, you know, as I said, we're sitting here, and this is kind of, as of right now, the proposed possibilities of where we can go. So it's an exciting place to be. It's really exciting to have ETH2, you know, officially launch and begin the process of development, and also to be, you know, to be a part of this development and to be here to witness kind of its birth, and then to imagine the possibilities moving forward, which are pretty endless, which is exciting. So I've purposely left kind of a bunch of time at the end for questions, but thank you for sticking around to the end of day one, and for listening to my presentation on ETH2. So I would love to answer questions if there are any, or have discussion with people who agree, disagree, you know, have things to add. So yeah, that was kind of the ETH2 crash course. So thank you for having me. So I guess we'll open it up to questions. Let's see. Let's see here.
Yeah, if the candidates have any questions, they can post it in the Q&A or chat so that Kate can answer that.
Okay, so will the users of Ethereum 2.0 be able to choose which shard they want to send their transaction to, or will the transaction from the users be assigned automatically? You'll have the ability to choose. Yeah, it's not predetermined for you, which is pretty cool. Even if it's not necessarily questions, even if people have things to add, to contribute. I know I left a little bit of time at the end. We have about 10 more minutes, so if anyone wants to ask any more questions. I know it's the end of the day for everyone there. So what will happen to the consensus mechanism if there are less than 2/3 validators online? So we actually saw this happen in the testnet, and it caused significant network issues, disruptions, but that's been patched. Well, patched. It happened in the testnet, and so now they're prepared for it on mainnet. So it did cause the network not to go down, but it did cause significant delays and disruptions on the network. So that's been initially patched so that the network will not go down, in theory. Yeah, so with this transition from proof of work to proof of stake, it's rather than expending mining power, so with your GPU, it's really going to switch over to staking, right? So think of it when, you know, as with Bitcoin, when the last Bitcoin is mined, the whole model will shift. And that's why there's this kind of long transition from the proof of work model that we're using now to proof of stake, is that the whole idea is to increase accessibility and also to decrease the load of the electricity expenditure on the network. So mining farms, they're not really going to have as much purpose, well, any purpose, because it's going to completely shift models. But the process is going to kind of, it's not going to be sudden, as you saw with all the phases. It's going to slowly phase it out, which is the objective. So there's not just a massive shock to the system, but it will completely migrate over to a proof of stake model. So mining in the proof of work, that chain will exist as one of the 64 chains, but mining will become obsolete. It will not be used on the ETH2 blockchain. When can we expect ETH 2.0? Your guess is as good as mine. There was actually a lot of uncertainty as to whether the events would be triggered to launch phase 0, the beacon chain, on December 1st. It was really kind of at the final hour that that enough stake was received to trigger the events. So as with everything Ethereum, it's very much a community effort. So I don't know. Hopefully, in the near future, 2022, 2021. But again, it could be sooner. It could be later. The roadmap is at best, speculative. So your guess is really as good as mine. One of the validator stakes was more than 32 Ether, while the rest of the test network was deployed. Why is that? So you can stake more than 32 ETH. Your reward is proportional to your stake. Sir, any more questions? If there's no more questions, I can ask, if anyone wants to share when they think ETH2 will come, if people are if the audience is in agreement with the complete shift to proof of stake. If not, has it happened? I'm not sure, actually. You could, if you look at the testnet that I mentioned before, beaconcha.in, you can go through everything and kind of and that'll answer that question. How do we join Ben's WhatsApp group? I can drop the link in the chat here. So we have a WhatsApp group. We also have a Telegram and a Discord. We're trying to migrate everyone over to Discord because that's kind of more active, but it's just blockchain edu on Discord. I will drop the link to the WhatsApp here, but it's free to join. So we're an organization that focuses on providing free resources to students, whether that be business, a business track, a development track, or kind of a general interest track. And we're always looking for students to contribute to our wiki as well, which is decentralized and maintained by our students, our partners, our the alumni on the network, and the professors. So if you'd like to get your research paper, your workshop, your anything published on the Ben Wiki, we're always looking for contributions.